50 is a magical biological year. Things start to fall apart. And we found out later, a lot of these assessments were based on genetic, disposition. If you had good genes to be a jumper and you could run fast, it was all through genes. It had nothing to do with fitness.
Welcome to Longevity Advantage. I'm your host, Scott Fulton. It is an honor to be with you again today. We all know exercise is important to health and longevity, but it turns out most of us don't really understand what that means, at least not in an adult context. It's really about functional fitness. That's what we're talking about. It's functional fitness that will sustain us well into our later years. My special guest today is Mike Waters. Mike is one of the top adult fitness experts in the country. Coming from a deep academic background, Mike's been a fitness pro for over 40 years. He has seen it all. For all of us over 50, Mike's message is filled with important and practical advice. Sit back and enjoy our discussion, and as always, feel free to post any questions you have down below, and we'll try to answer them as best we can. Enjoy. Welcome, everyone. We're here today again with Mike Waters. Mike has just a tremendous wealth of experience in adult fitness, and we look to Mike on all sorts of topics. The topic we wanted to go into today was really around functional fitness, and we'll talk a little bit about what functional fitness is for the everyday person, because that's really what we're talking about here. And really kind of walk through what sort of things we can look at doing at home. What are ways to assess what we're doing? What are some of the things we can look to do to maybe make some improvements around our health as a result of some of our DIY work at home that will at a minimum get us started down the right path. So Mike, welcome back to Longevity Advantage. Always great talking to you. We talk a lot offline, I know, and get into all sorts of things. So it's kind of hard. We'll try to narrow it in a little bit on this one again today. But welcome.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
So Mike, we said we wanted to talk about functional fitness, and this was really me kind of reaching out to you because fitness means a lot of different things to a lot of different people at different points in life. And I think where I really wanted to take today was a conversation going into those who don't have a fitness background, but have an appreciation that they probably need to pay more attention to it if they're going to achieve the health outcomes that they're looking to get both in near term and in future years. And maybe they're dealing with some disease and it's part of a rehab program, but something that they want to build into their life. So maybe you can kind of give us the background around kind of the whole assessment piece and kind of where all that comes from and where we really should be moving.
Great, thanks, Scott. So like a lot of our LinkedIn colleagues, I come from, in my academic training and certifications, I come from an exercise is medicine foundation. Okay, so when I first got into this, my mentors in exercise physiology, it was based on health. And at that time in the early 70s, it was really about preventing heart disease. That was the initial one. But now we know we're talking about cancer and other, lifestyle type diseases. But, even the brain, even preventing dementia and Alzheimer's. But so right from the get-go, even though, and I'm going to share this with everybody, some people already know this, I'm a football coach. So I actually come from a personal and professional background with athletics, but when I decided to go into this field, I wanted to separate myself and help people that were not as healthy and work in that area. So right from the get-go, I wanted to separate both. And it's been a real challenge all through my career, as some of my colleagues who've been in this for a while can attest to. So based on, so when I started doing fitness testing, I was with the YMCA, and we had a protocol, a fitness testing protocol for adults with norms. Okay, and I don't know if you remember the last session I did with you. We talked about you have your chronological age and your biological age. So with the fitness assessments and various aspects of our physical being, we can measure your chronological age and compare it with your biological age. Okay, so that's one thing right there from the beginning. So I did a lot of fitness testing. I was certified by American College of Sports Medicine. I could actually read. I could conduct a treadmill test. I could read EKGs, although that was up to a doctor to do that. But I had that kind of certification to be able to do it. So I worked in cardiac rehab, and so I came from a totally different perspective. But also what was happening, if some of my colleagues and people that listen to this remember, in schools, we had the President's Council on Physical Fitness. Do you remember that? Okay. It actually started a little bit with the Eisenhower administration. I know some people remember Dwight Eisenhower. And when John F. Kennedy was the president, he really got it going. So they implemented in schools in their physical education program. So we start with physical education. Well, what we find out later is the assessments for cardiovascular, strength, and flexibility were based on performance, were based on sport and performance. So you had the President's Council on Physical Fitness, and the term sport was in there, which was scary. So right from the get-go, people have told me through the years, adults have told me, Mike, I don't want to go through a fitness assessment because I went through that in school and in high school, and it scared me because I couldn't do a pull-up, or I couldn't run fast, or I couldn't remember the standing broad jump? Which is a track thing. And we found out later, a lot of these assessments were based on genetic disposition. If you had good genes to be a jumper, and you could run fast, it was all through genes. It had nothing to do with fitness. So that's where it kind of started, and people were kind of scared to do it. Now, but what we did do when I worked for the YMCA in California, and then when I opened up Timber Hill Athletic Club in 1980, for me, that's when it all came together, where I ran that thing like a clinic. So we were talking about our friend Dan Zeman, being real hardcore. Well, that was me in 1980. It was exercise prescription. I'm going to test you cardiovascularly, strength, flexibility. I'm going to assess you. And then from that, give you your personalized exercise prescription. So a lot of people that understood that, what I was trying to do, it made total sense to them, because this is all brand new. This adult fitness and exercising and all this, it was all brand new. But that was the mode I got into. And I know I've got some colleagues that might listen to this that will nod in agreement. They started the same way. But so I wanted to totally separate the performance-based measure and evaluation, where, okay, so how, what pace per mile could I do a marathon? How much weight can I lift in a 1 rep test? Things like that. I wanted to get as far away from that as I could, because like we talked about, we're in it, a lot of us are in it to really help people. And we're trying to get a population of people now, particularly boomers. A lot of us are working with boomers now who have type 2 diabetes, who have high blood pressure. They've got a lot of chronic diseases. So Yeah, so I want to get us back on this path of assessment, and I know my colleagues Hugh and Heather from their MedX program, they're trying to do this. Bob Boone and his staff at Medical Fitness Association. So I know a little bit more about Medical Fitness Association. So the clubs and gyms they're at across the nation, um, if you join, you have to get a fitness assessment. You have to get a fitness assessment. And they kind of do it like I did many years ago. Their doctor will get a copy of that assessment. So there's a connection with the medical establishment to establish some credibility. This is important. This is your health. What we're measuring here through these physical assessments, and sometimes it's connected with a blood lipid profile. So in my various paths through the years working with hospital systems, I did the fitness assessment. The lab people did the blood work, and we had a full-blown report that went out to people. Now, one of the challenges is these assessments, as comprehensive as they are, costs. You don't give it away, and so there's always a little bit of an extra fee. And even today, some of the systems that I know about, if you want something comprehensive like this, it'll cost. And unfortunately, insurance programs, even Medicare, will not. They won't pay for that. And that's something that Bob Boone and I talk about: is why can't we be at the table with healthcare systems and be part of insurance plans? When I presented at the IRSA conference a couple of years ago, there were a few presentations on this, on certain medical type fitness organizations trying to get legislation, trying to work in with the health insurance plans, and so be part of the whole picture. Okay, that exercise is medicine. It's much more effective in a lot of ways than to take, medications for a long period of time. So there's been a history. We got away from it. I don't know why. My feeling is it takes a certain type of staff. And I'm going to be honest, I'm probably going to get blasted for this, but young, fit personal trainers don't always think in terms of, fitness is medicine. They think more performance because that's where they are in their life. Now, maybe I was an old soul from the beginning. When I was younger, in my 20s in this, but I always thought is I'm going to help people with an exercise as medicine. I'm going to get them healthier and reduce risk factors. That's what we call them then. But that's one of the problems. So yeah, I noticed that. I noticed when at Timber Hill Athletic Club, when I came back here in '92 to run the HP worksite program for us, I noticed that the staff had gotten away from doing any fitness testing. It was basically doing a kind of a health intake questionnaire and then showing people a basic exercise plan. And there was no, in my mind, there was no connection with their health to it. People knew they needed to get healthy, they needed to lose weight, they had all the data, but there's nothing specific for them to show. This is where you are now, and to be healthier, you need to be at this level. Okay, particularly with cardiovascular fitness, we can measure that from a young person to an older person. Your level of aerobic fitness correlates with certain chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, blood pressure, elevated lipids. There's a whole history of that connects together. Well, we got away from that. We got away from that. even at some of the universities around, like I'm right here in Corvallis or OSU. They got away. The professors would tell me they got away from teaching what's called methods classes, where a student would learn how to conduct a fitness assessment. They got away from it. Students weren't taking those classes anymore. So there's really a resurgence of that going on with Hugh and Heather, Charlie Rowe with his medical fitness group, and Bob, of course, Bob Boone with the Medical Fitness Association. American College Sports Medicine is active again. ACE, American Council on Exercise, they have a which I was delighted to see, with their personal training personal training certification program. They have a track where they'll actually train the staff to learn how to conduct a fitness test, a base fitness test. And I'm delighted to see that, because that adds to the credibility of the trainer, and it makes the work complete. So you assess someone, you give them an exercise prescription, you motivate them if they need motivation through 6 or 8 weeks, maybe sometimes 4 weeks, and then you come back and you reassess again. And if there's pretty good compliance, we're going to see improvement. And that in itself, I've learned, is a heavy motivator for people. When they see they're improving in certain areas of their fitness, that motivates them to continue. And then we change the prescription. We upgrade the prescription. It's just like taking medicine. Okay, you have a certain dosage. You do that for a while. Okay, if it works, we lower the dosage. In the case of exercise, we continue on with it because we know it's working. See, so it's very powerful. But ACSM has the same thing. They have a personal training program, and they too will train people. There's a certification organization, and I apologize, the name escapes me. And this is one our staff at Fitness Over 50 is trained in. It's how to train to give programming for older adults. And we're talking about working with older adults 85 plus. In that certification, I've seen the book, there are assessments that can be done. Now, some of the assessments are like the ones I sent you from ACSM. There's what's called the Senior Fitness Assessment. So, there's assessments like that. But I'm delighted to see this. So we show people, here's where you are, comply with the workout, and then we'll show improvement. So so that's kind of the path we're on today.
Yeah, there's as you're talking there, there's that credo that we can't improve what we can't measure. And so just by virtue of starting to measure changes behavior, and the fact that you comply with the prescription, improvement is inevitable.
Right. Well, Scott, I find it's interesting because in my career, I've helped a cardiologist or internal medicine physician do a treadmill test on a patient. So I did the fitness part of the assessment. The doctor did, of course, the medical part of the assessment. What's interesting is when I worked on that path and put together what we call their max VO2, which is a measure of aerobic capacity, and we'll go into that today, but it correlated with their cardiac health. It made sense to them. It wasn't scary. But if I did that outside of that environment in the club or the YMCA and everything, some people were scared. They didn't want to look at themselves and measure. Sometimes self-reflection and finding out about yourself is scary. And when you do a fitness assessment, you find that out. In many years, I've been in the field wherever I've been, where we've offered field tests, we've offered these kind of things. I've had people say, no, I'm unfit. I already know that. I already know that. And this is something that Bob and I talk about. Well, yes, I know you're unfit, but we can find a starting point of where to get started to improve that. And but yeah, it's tough. It's tough when you don't, you might be good and you might be a musician, you might be an artist, you might be an engineer, you might have all these things that you're really good at, but you're not good in health. So we talk about self-efficacy and all that comes into play, and that it could be daunting. It could be a little daunting. So we have to keep putting the message out of, this is for your health. We don't want to scare you. We have a plan for you based on this assessment.
Yeah, and I think what most people would fail to realize, because there's nowhere that they would get this information until they kind of have lived through it, is how easy it is to make significant improvements. So if you combine the two things of some subtle diet changes and some initiating some exercises, in a matter of a few weeks, suddenly the person feels like they've now just kind of walking on air. Their health response, their body response in a matter of a few weeks is absolutely shocking, because, and so in some respects, the worse state you're in, the bigger the opportunity for improvement. But then, the other I look at is, the earlier you start, the bigger the opportunity is, because you have less way to get back up the mountain, right? So the further down there, or over the other side of the mountain you've gone, the longer you can get there, but it's a longer climb.
Right.
So I really try to encourage people by age 50. Tell me what your thought is, but by age 50, we've got a pretty good assessment of who we are. We've got through most of those difficult years of, when the kids were young and keeping us challenged, and the career we were trying to find our way around our career. But we've also hopefully been able to watch our parents age and have a view of what our future might look like, and realize I'm not where my parents were. I look around now and I know a lot of 50-year-olds are not in the health that their parents were at that same age.
Exactly.
So it's really important to recognize that bit of self-reflection and a bit of honesty, and say, well, okay, well, I can get there. If my parents got there or others got there, there's no reason I can't get there. But so how do we get started? So maybe you can kind of take me into the piece of, so if I'm at home and I've never been an athlete, for example, and I don't know where to start. So what would be some things that I could at least get started on? So let's kind of focus on the younger adults first, and the younger ones, will say in their 50s. What would be some things that they could look at home to get some initial benchmarks of a feel of, is there an opportunity for improvement, so that they can then begin to measure against?
Yeah. I want to say this first. You got me going now, because you and I have talked, and so what you brought up is where I start weaving in health, physical health, with emotional health and gerontology. So when I do talks, I talk about so the doctors have a kind of a chart at different, every 10 years, they're going to screen a woman, a male, for certain health issues. Okay. What I talk about with men, and you mentioned 50. Now 50, even though we're living longer, 50 is a magical biological year when you start getting in your 50s. So if you haven't been good to your health, to your body, if you haven't been good, things start to fall apart. Okay. Now, some people will step up and say, okay, well, we're seeing type 2 diabetes and heart attacks, things like that with younger populations of both men and women. But overall, when we get into the 50s, if you look at the data, the biological data, we see a lot of health risks. And if you look, so I've talked to doctors about this, and they show me what they start screening for. In men's stuff, in gerontology, there's also an interesting area of the psychosocial, emotional aspects of aging. Men start to reflect on their career, or have I been a good husband or a good parent? And so they start talking about their legacy. And then the ego comes into play. And I know anecdotally, because I've had these conversations with men at that age, and it's really interesting. If a male is not feeling, and it's probably true with females as well. Okay, now with more women through the years in the workforce, but when men, when we don't feel like we've made a difference, emotionally, we get a little bit, I don't want to say stressed out, or there's some depression. Well, we're not going to work on our health. We're not all of a sudden going to get excited and I'm going to go to the gym and start taking care of myself. We kind of start digressing. And I connect both data points in there, and I really feel, and based on conversations with males, even 60-year-old males that are thinking about retiring and, should I keep working? We're at a choice point there where, we can either improve our health and make a difference, or we can continue to decline. So it's really interesting where both the biological and the emotional side of our being comes into play with that. So I had to say that. I had to say that because I experience that. I in my work, I've experienced that. And so what I've said all along is the data, when I get the data, I see the story behind it. See, I see the stories behind it. All right.
So on that point, maybe for people watching is, people like Mike and I, we have the unique ability to see the future. And, we look at Patrick and gerontologists and things, and it's really not that hard to see. But we can look at somebody and sum them up in a matter of seconds, generally around just by watching them move. It tells a tremendous story about them, not in great accuracy, but we can certainly predict what someone's future is in store, particularly when we talk about in morbidity, in terms of what their long-term health future is likely to be. And so that's why the earlier we can get started, and around 50 is typically a big year where, emotionally, in our mind, it maybe means something, but it is real biologically. It's an important point in our life that it really is a key time. If we're in the habit of putting things off, and we continue to do it, changing that habit in future years isn't going to be easier, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's at the point where we're kind of going to get real with ourselves and say, well, whatever it was, I screwed up raising my kids, or whatever, screwed up
Right.
as a husband, or
That's right.
whatever it was. Like, it's in the past, right? So what are we going to do about the future? If we're going to spend it all kind of, feeling like our ego is wounded and not take advantage of the years in front of us, then that will have a big impact on what our own experience will be. So anyway, so how do we get started with kind of getting a gauge on where am I today, and how might I do that?
So
as a young 50-year-old?
Yeah. So I think about, I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to talk about, going to the gym and having a certified person. I'm going to talk about home fitness assessments. And the opportunity is, you can self-assess. You can do these assessments that are simple, and you can do it privately, because we know in change, in the psychology of change, autonomy is critical. Autonomy is critical, and you can do some things like this without anybody knowing. And I was going to do this session today, so I did a semi-meta search of a bunch of. I just went online, did a whole bunch of, looked at a home fitness assessments, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them, and they can be real simple. They can be a little more complex. Some you can do the assessment part, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then it'll actually give you an exercise prescription, a basic exercise prescription from that, which is really good. But my point is, you can do it yourself and get started that way at any age. Now, here's what's important. Now, you mentioned young people, but what I need to say is, in these assessments, it has what we call norms. So what's considered healthy, and we go anywhere from very poor to very healthy or very fit. And we'll have norms for women and norms for men. And usually the norms are spread out every 10 years. Okay, so, so there's norms starting from 20 to 30. Now, when I worked for the YMCA, there were norms that went every 5 years on the various tests. But some of the general ones I looked at, it was every decade. There was a norm. So, what it does is, it takes the ego out. So, so if you're 20 to 30, and you do a cardiovascular test, a step test. Okay, so there's a home step test. And usually what's recommended is a 6-inch secure box, and you do what's called a 3-minute step test, where you go up and down, moderately. Some you use a metronome, and it's got like so many beats, a second. And then you do this for 3 minutes, stop. And then some of the tests, you wait for a minute and take a wrist pulse. Some you immediately take your pulse after. There's a whole bunch of different field tests to assess cardiovascular fitness. Now, what's interesting with these modern technology, with Apple Watches, Garmin watches, they'll actually take your pulse during and after an assessment, and they'll download the data. I mean, you can get really technical with this kind of stuff. So what happens is, you get the recovery heart rate, and then you get a norm, okay? And then so if you're 20 to 30, it's certain beats, recovery beats, it'll put you in a classification, all right, a certain classification. And then, and of course from there, again, as I've been trying to point out, is don't lose hope, don't give up. Let's get into aerobic exercises. I know most people call it cardio today, but get into a nice planned aerobic program where we improve, when you can come back in a month, 6 to 8 weeks, and then replicate the test again. Okay. Now the same thing with strength. Now the home. So what we do in the clinical session, gyms, clubs, labs, is we use weights to assess strength training. Home test, what I normally see are push-up tests. So for women, of all ages. It's usually the bent knee push-up, where you're on your knees and then you're going where you go down where your elbows are at 90 degrees, and then you come back up. And that's a 1 minute test. That's a 1 minute test. And then you count, no cheating, you count the number you do in 1 minute. For men, it's the full prone position where you're out, you're on your toes, you're on your arms that way. That's the men's test. So same thing, 1 minute, count, and then again, we've got the norms based on the different decades and how many you have to do. And so if somebody 50 were to look at some of these home tests, and they would see the norm, the grade, if you will, I hate to put it that way, they would see as you get older, you don't have to be as good to be healthy. See, it doesn't have to do with performance. Okay. Now, some of the people like me who have an ego, we want to be better. So we're older, but we want an aerobic capacity, or we want strength that of a younger male, 10, 20 years younger. Okay, because it's a badge of honor to have something like that. But again, that's not our theme today. Our theme is health. So, but that's the neat thing about norms that I've noticed in all these home fitness tests, is it's based on health. It's based on health. It's based on where the person is in that decade, and it will show up if you haven't been doing these things, using your upper body. It can be gardening. It doesn't have to be going to the gym. If you haven't been using these things, then it will show up in these assessments. The other assessment is for the lower body, and it's both the same for men and women. It's kind of like a squat. It's a repetitions of squats, going from a squat position to coming up, hands out where you're balanced. Okay. Some have cross your arms. You got to watch your balance a little bit. And again, it's a 1 minute assessment. You count the reps, and that gives you your power, your power muscles, your glutes, your hamstrings, your hip flexors, the power muscles, for that assessment. Now, the senior assessment that I sent to you from ACSM, that the way they do it for older adults is from a chair. You do a sitting squat and then you stand up, and the cadence, it's 1 minute. The cadence can be much slower, and then the norms are adjusted. And usually the norms, by the way, I'll mention this now, for that senior assessment, that was actually set up to be done in assisted living communities and what we used to call nursing homes. And it's really interesting how I've interviewed staff in senior living. They don't know anything about those kind of assessments. So it hasn't really worked. I put on some assessments at our senior center here in Corvallis. I've used those assessments, so all right. So the one that's new. Another assessment is we used to do sit-ups. We used to do the sit-up test. Okay. The new one I've seen is a plank from the yoga. So you're on your elbows, on your forearms and your elbows, and your legs are out. This is for both men and women. Okay. And it's how you go 1 minute. It's like, how can you hold for 1 minute? And that assesses what we now call core, the core strength. And that has replaced the traditional sit-up test, where we do the sit-up. How many sit-ups can you do in 1 minute? That's replace that test. Now, as far as the clinical lab type assessments on measuring core, I don't know. They might still be doing a sit-up type test. I know there are machines like ab machines now that I've seen where you can do a fitness assessment on your core using a machine with a whole protocol and norms set up from that. But we're talking about the home. So so the plank is the new core assessment test. The final test is the sit and reach test. And there's various ones. There's ones where you have a box and it's got a ruler and you set the rule. You know, it's got to be more orchestrated, where you've got to have the ruler at a certain point, and then you do 3 tries and you reach as far as you can, and then you record that score. You know, how many inches past really past your the ends of your feet. And there's also the sit and reach test. We used to do that with the Y, where we have people sit down, spread their legs apart, put a ruler at a certain point at their heels, and then you have 3 tries to reach out as far as they could and touch a point on the ruler. And then that would assess general hip, low back, hip flexibility. I'm not sure about that one, you know, because there's, you know, we've got so many forms of yoga now and different functional movement tests. I probably need to ask Charlie how do they assess that at his clinic. There's very sophisticated ways to do that. But so to review, we have the cardiovascular aerobic step test. Okay. Oh, let me add one to that. Rockport. I don't know if anybody remembers from the 80s, there used to be the Rockport walking shoes, and there were actually classes on walking. And I had some Rockport walking shoes I used to wear to work. They have a 1 mile fitness assessment you can do on a measured track, or you can do on a treadmill. I actually did some of these kind of tests when I was at Timber Hill. And what you do is you walk as briskly as you can for 1 minute. You get the time it takes. So let's say it takes you 17 minutes to walk a mile. And then you have the norms for men and women based on that pace. That's another field test. We call these field tests, meaning because it's outside of a lab or outside of a club or gym type thing. So that's the other one. All right, so we have those tests. And then we have the strength test. I said the push-up test for men and women, 1 minute. We have the low strength test for the glutes, hips, hamstrings. That's 1 minute, number of reps. We have the new one now for the core. We're doing the plank. And how can I hold? Can I hold in that position for 1 minute? And then we have the sit and reach test. And that's the battery of tests. And I would recommend do what's important. I think, to me, what's most important is the aerobic capacity. That's where everything starts. But I would say the top 2 would be aerobic and the push-up test. Okay, so let's say it's the step test. I got a 6-inch box that's secure, 3 minutes, record my heart rate after, get my baseline, and then the push-up test. That's pretty good. That takes care of a lot of things right there. Okay, and then you design your program from there.
Right, because aerobic is going to tie back to cardiovascular disease, right?
Yes.
And that's for
cancer.
The vast majority, that's the #1 health risk that is sneaking up on almost everybody, and they have no idea that it's out there. So it'll start to reveal that, but it also is obviously going to help to mitigate and even potentially reverse it if depending on
Right.
how committed
Right.
they are around lifestyle choices.
Right. And don't, let's not forget cancer, because I'm doing talks now on exercise as medicine for cancer. There's tons of data, quantifiable data, where it's dosage related based on certain cancers, and brain health. And what's interesting that the tau plaque in the brain is a similar chemistry to the plaque that we have in coronary artery disease. It's all the same. It's all the same. What I jokingly say when I talk about the brain, in fact, I did a Zoom talk to a group. I go, isn't it funny, for years when we talked about health and, you know, and fitness, we talked from the neck down, but yet it's all connected. It's all, the biology is all connected.
Well, and as validation of that, the other stress test alternative is look at the carotid artery for plaque buildup. So, if it's getting to here, there's nothing to say it's not getting to the rest of the brain, right? And that's it's more distributed, but that's for, it certainly all ties back to a number of things around the blood-brain barrier, right? And protecting those endothelial cells, exercise, nitric oxide release, all these things that come out of exercise around places, and it's got nothing to do with the size of your biceps.
Exactly. Boy, you've hit on the endothelium part of the cell. It's really tough. You're talking about, it's like, as we get older, can we change? Well, we're embarking. I had one of my interns this quarter did a couple Zoom talks on nutrition, and it's all about plants. And we have enough data now, starting with Dr. Ornish, Dean Ornish, and his colleagues, Campbell, and all the doctors and researchers on promoting plants, even reversing plaque, improving the endothelium. I mean, it's huge. We're trying to make a case, but we got people at Fitness Over 50 that, oh, does it have to be that healthy? Can I just, can I, and so that's where it's tough. It's easier. What I've found in working with older adults, the exercise part is much easier than the nutrition.
Yeah, because you can turn it into different games and things that, in terms of variations.
Well, and you connect it with being social. So we know, here's the conflict. So an older generation, boomers and olders, we're very social. We come from that. Okay. Well, how do we be social? We eat. And when we eat, we don't necessarily eat healthy foods. It doesn't matter. We'll eat. And so, like at I'm sure my colleagues will, in their areas will see it. At Fitness Over 50, we get groups that go out together. Well, where they go out is they eat comfort food. They're not, but they're having fun together, socializing, and that's a health protectant as well. So it's,
yeah. There's it's obviously hard for those on the inside to see it, but I think it's fairly evident if we look at the grocery store shelves that the message is getting out there, and the number of physicians coming forward now who working together. I'm working, I don't know if you know, with Dr. David Katz.
Yeah.
So I was, just before you, I'm on a call with Dr. Katz and Dr. Zach Bush on this project we're putting together. That's an international project that has, and it's really an indication of both the need and the opportunity and people. And when we get these kind of people starting to collaborate together, it really helps to move the needle, and people know it's not real. It's not some quack who's, trying to sell a magic potion or whatever.
Exactly.
That's the good news. As soon as someone says, buy my product and you're going to get a fix of whatever.
That's right.
It doesn't mean it won't, but it means you need to ask better questions. But in terms of exercise, the basic things that you're talking about, Mike, are you don't need to go buy anything to be able to have dramatic impact on fitness, other than you want a pair of good running shoes that to work with, and they could just be good walking shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, for what you're talking about.
Yep. Yep.
So I think if I can kind of recap on some of this, all of these things really apply across the age spectrum. By age 50, we really want to be dialing in on it. But with the norms in 10-year age increments, we can adapt that from wherever. So if I'm sitting here at 65, I can see where I am. And so I'll work with you, and I'll put some links down in the comments down below for people to go and look and find some of these things as well. And so if I'm in Corvallis, boy, I could come and get you or one of your folks to help me. But if I want to go to a gym or some other professional, so think about people around the country, how would they start to look to say, okay, I know I want to get help, but I really am not sure I want to work with the 22-year-old super buff. I want somebody who gets what I'm about and understands kind of what I'm looking for. I'm looking to be an Olympian.
Well, I want to, having said that, and I get scolded on LinkedIn a lot but if it is a 22-year-old, but if they have, the first thing I would ask if I went to a gym, do you have a fitness is medicine philosophy? And you could make an excuse, say, well, my doctor told me to look for that. Now, if the salesperson, staff, whoever you're talking to, looks at you funny, you want to be careful. That's not, to me, that's not where you want to go. That's not where you want to go. You want to find an exercise as medicine philosophy within that gym. Now, it could be a younger gym. Now, okay, I'm not going to use any names, but all I'm going to say is the national gym chains don't usually have this, and they don't have an exercise as medicine philosophy. But I know these systems, these systems I talked about, they're trying to approach these places to bring in that kind of philosophy in there to enhance their membership. But we have to be honest. We just have to be honest. There are gyms and clubs who just aren't interested in really getting people healthier. So you have to be. So if you lack the motivation and you need that help, you need that assessment, motivation, and follow-up, and to be followed along just like a physician would follow you, you have to find a gym that does that.
Right, and I guess that's also balanced against convenience, because if that gym is an hour away, maybe it's one you go for, once a month or something, and you go to your local gym to actually, because you need to be in that space, but you're not relying on the personnel, because there's probably, so it just would put more back on the individual to try to learn and realize because all the things you're talking about are not sophisticated. It's probably got a lot to do with habit, which is why the convenience is important. It's just in terms of where you're going to take your guidance from may not be in the same facility as where you're going to work out.
Well, in a systems approach, and this is something I haven't, I'd be interested in hearing from Hugh and Heather. I've talked with Bob Boone at Medical Fitness is what they do. So let's say let's use the convenience thing. So you go to their place and you get an assessment, and let's say they have very similar exercise equipment. Well, they'll do the exercise prescription for you, and then you could go back to your, let's say you belong to a chain gym. You take that information and you go ahead and you work out. and then you just go in there and you start doing it. And then it depends on the gyms too, if they allow, well, one, I will say, I'm going to use the name because they will allow this, Anytime Fitness. If you have a personal trainer or a fitness professional working with you, they will allow that person to go in there with you. See, so maybe these, systems that I'm referring to, maybe that could be a solution to the convenience.
Right. Yeah. There's no one size fits all in terms of what's
Exactly.
the, because there's still the individual component around how self-motivated they are as well. So, but I think that the main thing, hopefully, which I think you've really helped to lay out for us is get an establishment of what's your benchmark, what's your starting point, what's the benchmark you'd measure yourself against, and how you'd be able to measure, because these are all pretty simple things for any of us to get started on, and just to, get after this, go find a 6-inch step, which, so you can measure the steps in your house, and chances are it's about a 7-inch step, so not too far off if you don't have an 6-inch step. And do certainly the push-ups are easy. So and then from there, it just it hopefully provides some motivation and a starting point, right? Because this is the hardest part: get started and then turn it into a routine. And so when we think about fitness, what do you generally give as guidance around what frequency per week?
Well, we should, about 3 days a week, about 3 days a week. Or I kind of like the new, so there's two people in kind of the health psychology area, BJ Fogg from Stanford, and then James Clear. I've got his book here, Atomic Habits, and it, where you do a little bit daily. So you do a little bit daily. Okay. So having said all this about assessment, if I were to work, somebody would be willing to put themselves in my hands, I would start them out with small steps and constantly follow up. I would not do an assessment right away. See, I wouldn't do, this is more on motivational than physical assessment. I would have them get to a certain level of compliance, and then I'd say, Scott, why don't we do a couple of assessments here and see where you're at, okay? And then that becomes part of my coaching. That becomes part of my practice with you or that person is. But I like that today. Just simple, small stuff. Walk around the block. You mentioned that already. You don't even have to join a gym. Make it simple. And then the data shows from both these men that compliance will increase. But what we tend to do, sorry, I did it when I first got in the field. American College of Sports Medicine guidelines said 45 minutes to an hour of aerobic work, 3 sets of maybe 7 or 8 strength training exercises, plus the Bob Anderson stretching. Everybody remembers Bob Anderson stretching. It's like, good Lord, you'd be there, and that's 5 days a week. I mean, you spend now, and then I think that's one of the reasons why it didn't work. And so I was doing this. I was doing the fitness assessment and then the exercise prescription. These people were loving it because I'm spending all kinds of time with them. Their own spouse didn't spend that much time with them. I'm doing this for them. But I think we gave too much. So let's do it smaller. Let's start out smaller. This is for the population that don't eat this like ice cream like we do. Let's start out smaller and build that compliance to that where they enjoy it. And then maybe maybe do the assessment or have them do a self-assessment then. So things like that. So
Okay. As you were talking there, I pulled up. So here's an example of a Garmin watch that I had bought for myself a while ago. Sorry, it was a reflection there. Um, so with the watch, it automatically talks to the phone, and there's an app on my phone, and it'll tell also. So this particular one is showing how many minutes in the week. So that was an activity. So this particular week, there were 3 activity days on the week, and it says, a certain number of minutes, and I can switch to a different week, and that's this week, which was early in the week. So that was yesterday, I guess. But there's all sorts of information that people can get from these sort of things. If you're interested in what electronic coaching or monitoring has to
yes,
offer, and having a record, and I do nothing. I put it on and I turn it on and I go. That's it. Like it does it all in the background. I don't have to look at it to know what to do or anything.
there are certain
That's the status
personalities
of it now.
There's certain personalities that do it, because I know a lot of people who have that stuff and they like toys. So if you're one that likes doing it, now I know I used to run with a guy, he loves that kind of stuff, and he would use it. He would use it. But if that doesn't motivate you, then it's just another toy. So yeah, you have to be careful with that. So
yeah, it's just a question. It goes back to know yourself, and if that's helpful or if that's a hindrance. Yeah,
yes.
I got it because I had a reason that I wanted to measure heart rate, and that's changed a lot since 10 years ago with my last heart rate monitor. Both, like, all sorts of elements have changed and progressed a lot, which a Fitbit, I guess, does a fair bit of that as well. So there's certainly more coming out with those things that you can monitor resting heart rate, which is another good indication of health in terms of how long it takes the heart rate to recover. All sorts of things will start to reveal. And if we look forward in a few years, as more doctors are familiar with how to assess functional health and functional fitness, that's probably only going to grow in meaning. But anyway, that's so that's kind of the electronics end of it for people looking for the toy. But ultimately, whatever gets people out, right? Whatever gets you through the night, well, whatever gets you out the door.
That's right. That's a well put. Well put.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thanks. I love talking to you. It's so motivating. I just always want to hang up and go for a run or go do anything, and it doesn't really matter. So I mean, I love moving. It's just the hardest days for me are the days I don't move a lot.
I know.
I can feel it in my body. I'm more tired by not moving than by moving. So
right.
Yeah, it's and for people who haven't ever had a fitness background, I really didn't have a fitness background until my 40s. So I discovered this fairly well into life. And of course, I wish I would have started it earlier, but I certainly started early enough to see a lot of benefits already, I know, in my health, to be able to look forward to. And ultimately, where we're trying to go with this is enjoy each day better on the journey, but certainly much better health outcomes down the road. And we can help people who've had an unfortunate diagnosis to help them get healthier. But the best bet always is be proactive, enjoy it, because it is fun once you start to do it, and you'll enjoy the journey, and you hopefully will avoid that difficult conversation that the doctor may have to have with you at some point, or at least push it back 10 years, which would be a great win, right? So
your body will be available to you for other things you enjoy in life. I mean, that's to me, that's the key.
Well, and it just means there's way more opportunities.
Right. Yeah.
The doors are slowly closing as we age, but this is certainly a way to reopen some doors, and certainly prevent a lot of doors from closing that otherwise there's no reason why we couldn't entertain. So
exactly. Yeah.
Well, excellent, Mike.
Yay.
A pleasure as always.
I as well. I really appreciate it. It's fun. This is really good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
really
I'll work with you, and we'll get some links to put into the bottom for resources for people to go
Excellent.
to, and certainly welcome any feedback or questions people have. Feel free to drop them in below.
Good deal. Good.
Okay, well, from Longevity Advantage, thank you, Mike Waters. A pleasure. Take care, sir.
Thank you. You as well, Scott. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.